Let's be honest, folks, Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit has not been the most beloved attraction over its tenure at Universal Studios Florida. Sure, when it first opened, you brought it home in a baggie, loved it for 2 weeks, and then nothing! Because really, this ride is rather unremarkable, generally speaking. Sure, the music element is wholly unique and really special and really great when you have a good song that's playing, but really outside of that, the ride layout and the elements it has to offer aren't really doing anything super special here. And that's why I would say probably around 2015 to 2019, somewhere around that range, is when we saw a bottoming out of Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit's popularity. Of course, it was fairly popular in the beginning when it first came out and it was the shiny new kid on the block, but after that, popularity kind of waned. People got kind of tired of its gimmick. It got old of the ride layout and its elements, and it kind of bottomed out where it probably should be as a sort of mid-tier attraction at Universal. And listen, folks, if this was still the reputation that Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit had today, then I wouldn't be making this video. Right? I would have no problem with some people being really down on the ride or some people being really high on the ride and the average kind of coming out somewhere to the middle. That's fine. But the overwhelming narrative in just the last couple years has become extremely negative. This ride went from having a sort of lukewarm sentiment towards it to now straight up being hated by what seems like the vocal majority. Now, that being said, this change in sentiment is not without reason. Just recently, Rip Ride Rockit went from having 30 songs that you could choose from to play on your ride to just 5. That is a colossal change. I mean, you went from having 6 songs you could choose from for each genre to now just 1? That's a brutal change that really hurt the ride experience, especially considering that a lot of the songs that were removed were songs that people really liked playing on the ride. So it's no wonder that some people soured on the attraction after that change. However, there is another major factor at play here, sort of outside of the ride's control, that is contributing to all this hate being bred out of the woodwork. And that is because a rumor has sprouted from the earth that Rip Ride Rockit's days are numbered. And in fact, the ride will be closing in the very near future. Now, many times rumors come and go and don't really leave a lasting impact on the general public or the perception of an attraction. But in this case, not only does the rumor come from reputable sources, but the rumor is believable. Right? It's not hard to understand why Universal would want to get rid of this attraction. After all, Rip Ride Rockit has reached 15 years of age, and at that stage for outdoor roller coasters at Universal, that is often crunch time. Either you get torn down and rebuilt for a massive refurbishment, and basically you're starting from ground zero, you're basically a brand new ride after that point, going the Incredible Hulk route, or you get thrown into the scrapyard like Dueling Dragons. Hulk lasted for 16 years before its refurbishment, and Dueling Dragons lasted 17 years before it was torn down for good. So the clock is ticking for Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit. But even beyond that, Rip Ride Rockit has had technical issues since day one. It has constantly been an operational nightmare for Universal, with constant breakdowns and technical mishaps happening on the regular with this attraction. They don't seem to happen as much anymore nowadays since they've kind of ironed out a lot of those issues, but it's been a problem since day one. It definitely has limited the way that Universal's wanted to operate this attraction. So basically, what you have is a reputable rumor that is saying that this attraction not only could close, but that it will be replaced by something new. And that's really the kicker right there. And that's why all the hate has bubbled up from beneath the earth and has all of a sudden changed the narrative about this attraction, because people are starting to hate Rip Ride Rockit more than they did previously, or at least be more vocal about it, because there is the prospect of it being replaced by something new. And though Universal has certainly had their missteps in recent memory, by and large, they have had hit after hit after hit with their new attractions, especially when it comes to major roller coasters, which would likely be what would replace Rip Ride Rockit given the land that it takes up, right? It's a very narrow plot of land. You can't very well put a dark ride in that spot. So with this golden carrot dangling in front of us and the prospect of a Velocicoaster 2.0 on the horizon, I completely understand why people who maybe felt indifferent about this ride, maybe even liked it a little bit, or maybe even like it a lot, have jumped on the bandwagon for getting rid of this attraction and have piled on to all the negativity that has been thrown Rip Ride Rockit's way. And though this is a completely understandable position for people to be taking, it has resulted in a great disservice being done to Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit. We are completely disrespecting this attraction that has provided Universal guests with some great experiences over the last decade and a half. And I, for one, believe that we should be treating Rip Ride Rockit with a bit more respect on its way out the door. Now, that being said, I'm not going to sit here and kid you folks. Rip Ride Rockit is perhaps the greatest gamble of an attraction to ever exist. It is so inconsistent in what it has to offer. You could ride it once and have a great time, and then ride it immediately after that and have a horrible ride experience. That is how much it varies. And I'm sure if you've ridden Rip Ride Rockit multiple times across multiple trips, you have experienced exactly this. It is never the exact same ride. It is always drastically different. Now, this is for a multitude of reasons, but with that being said, let's just not forget that Rip Ride Rockit brings a lot to the table that is wholly unique in the Orlando market. Nonetheless, potentially the United States or even the world, right? Namely, from a music aspect. Certainly, there are plenty of roller coasters out there that have music or audio, but Rip Ride Rockit is unique in the sense that you get to choose what you listen to on the ride. And yes, the options for what you get to listen to have been drastically reduced on the official list. However, there is still a secret song list that has 50 plus songs that you can choose from. For those unaware, if you hold the Rip Ride Rockit logo on the touchscreen for about 10 seconds and then let go, a keypad will open up for you to type in a 3-number code. And if you type in the code of a secret song, you get that song played on your ride. Now, obviously, it's unfortunate for those who aren't aware about the secret song list. It's unfortunate for those who can't get it to work, because trust me, it took me a while before I got good at pulling that list up. You know, sometimes you hold it for too long, you don't hold it for long enough, and then boop, you're out of time, you're already up on the ride, and it's over. You get stuck with some terrible dubstep song. I've had it happen 1,000 times, trust me. But once you get used to using the secret song list and you get access to those 50 songs, you're not going to miss the 30 songs that were recently removed. It's not going to make or break your day. And here's the great thing too about all the songs that are available on Rip Ride Rockit, whether they're an official song or they're a secret song, is that every single song is timed up perfectly to the elements of the ride. You'll notice with every single song you pick, there's always going to be some sort of drop or intro into the chorus as you hit the drop, right? And oftentimes many songs will even have other timing elements that match up with other parts of the ride. It's truly a beautiful thing to witness, because it could have been just as easy enough for Universal to just add these songs to the ride and be like, okay, well, we're just going to start it at the 5-second mark and just play the song regularly from there. But no, they timed everything up to perfectly sync up with the ride, at least as best as they could. And that's really an underappreciated aspect of what Rip Ride Rockit's bringing to the table. It's not just playing music, it's playing music that syncs up with the ride elements. Now, that being said, not every song available on Rip Ride Rockit is good. Just because it's synced up doesn't mean it's actually a great song to listen to on the ride. I mean, I've already talked about the terrible dubstep song that plays when you don't pick a song for the ride. Just a couple years ago, Rip Ride Rockit had a new exclusive song for Halloween Horror Nights that you had to put in the code 666 for, and it was a Chucky themed song. Super cool idea, right? A completely new song that's only available during this time of year. That's beautiful. That's awesome. Problem is, that song sucked. It was terrible. And I used it on the ride, and I honestly felt gypped.
Come on, I told you we'd be friends to the end, remember? And the end starts now.
So this is part of what I was saying when I said this ride is a gamble. Because sometimes you can get a great song that lines up perfectly with everything that's happening, and it's just a great, enjoyable experience. And sometimes you get a song that absolutely sucks. It just does not match the vibe at all. The first time I listened to Rainbow Connection by the Muppets on this attraction, I had a blast. I had a great time. But the first time that I listened to that Chucky song, yeah, I wanted to blow my brains out. It was awful. Drastically different ride experiences. However, it doesn't just stop there. Of course, this ride is notorious for having a silly amount of brake runs. Of course, these are moments in the ride where the track flattens out and you may or may not hit the brakes. It all really depends on, one, how many trains they have running on the track that day and how fast their operations are. If they're running fast enough and they don't have that many trains on the track, you could end up flying through these brake runs without hitting the brakes once, thus having a much faster experience throughout the entire ride and carrying much more speed through the latter half of the ride than you normally would. However, there could also be some moments where you're hitting every single brake run and you are slowing down on every single one of these and carrying much less speed throughout the back half of the ride than you normally would. Now, in my opinion, I actually don't think that the premier, the elite ride experience is actually getting no brake runs. I actually think that the best version of this ride is when you hit maybe 1 or 2 brake runs. The reason why is because I don't really think the extra speed in the latter half of this attraction is really doing anything. It doesn't really add anything to it. However, slowing up into some of those brake runs can actually be advantageous because it will give you much longer, more sustained floater airtime as you go down the drop after the brake run. So I actually think like 1 or 2 brake runs hitting is kind of the optimal version of this ride, but that might just be me. And regardless of that, your ride experience is going to vary drastically depending on how much these brake runs play a factor in the ride layout. And that is simply another gamble, another risk that a rider has to take every single time they experience this attraction. It is never going to be consistent. And of course, there are other elements here that do vary from ride to ride as well. Of course, if you ride during the day versus at night, your ride experience is going to be different. I would argue that Rip Ride Rockit offers one of the best night ride experiences you can get anywhere at Universal. I mean, you talk about views of the park at night and getting to see all the lights and whatnot and getting to see those beautiful views of the park. Rip Ride Rockit offers one of the best opportunities for that because you crest over that top hill so slowly you get a great view and a great panoramic view of both parks. Not to mention too that when those brake runs do hit, you get plenty of time to admire the park from an elevated standpoint. Really, the only other rides I would say offer a better viewing experience of the park at night would be Dr. Doom's Fearfall if you are facing the park, and the High in the Sky Sue's Charlie train ride. Not many other rides are offering a great view, and the only other ones that kind of do would be maybe Hulk and maybe Velocicoaster, but you're moving so fast on the elevated moments of those rides that you never really get an opportunity to really take in and soak in the view like you do at Rip Ride Rockit and these other rides. Not to mention that a daytime ride on Rip Ride Rockit could result in the sun absolutely melting your eyeballs down to their sockets because you, of course, are going up a vertical lift hill, and if you're going on this ride in the middle of the day, you might be staring directly at the sun. So that's not fun if you're getting a daytime ride on this attraction. But you know what? Day versus night, that might just be a matter of preference. It's not really making a greatly huge impact at the end of the day. What is making a big impact, though, is this final factor, which isn't really one that varies from ride to ride. This is something that seemingly varies from person to person. And that is the level of roughness on this attraction. Of course, as roller coasters age, they tend to get rougher as time goes on. That's just kind of the name of the game. And Rip Ride Rockit is no exception to this. As time has gone on, it has increasingly gotten more and more reports of roughness from guests in a pretty significant way. I've heard it being rough in the sense that you actually headbang on this thing, which of course is when your head is sort of rocking back and forth so intensely on the ride that it's actually banging into the restraints or into the seat back of the ride. Now, that's a little uncommon for a ride like Rip Ride Rockit because, of course, Rip Ride Rockit does not have over-the-shoulder restraints, which is typically what you would headbang into, right? Into those hard restraints on either side of your head, right? But Rip Ride Rockit, of course, has a lap bar. So it's a little bit strange to hear of headbanging on Rip Ride Rockit, but perhaps because of all the brake runs that are causing guests to kind of move forward in their seat and then slingshot back into it, that could be a cause for a lot of headbang for people who are not prepared for the brake runs coming up. I've also heard of some roughness in the nether regions. I'm very sorry for those people. And I've also heard of just general vibrations that make the ride very uncomfortable for people. And it's no wonder then that a lot of these people are not going to particularly enjoy the ride, or maybe will straight up avoid it altogether if roughness like this is occurring to them and is really, as a result, hurting their ride experience. However, I have to say, from personal experience, and maybe I'm just the chosen one, maybe I'm the lucky one, but I have never experienced an ounce of roughness on this attraction. But I will also say, not only am I not denying anyone's experiences who have had roughness on this ride, but I was saying that is actually fairly common for many rides that people do claim are rough at other theme parks. For some people to say, well, I didn't think it was rough at all, right? That's a fairly common thing. So I kind of suspect that I'm not the only person who hasn't experienced roughness on this ride, but if I am, hey, I'll take the Chosen One role. I'll take the Last Airbender, the Last Hokage role. I'll take that, all right? I will carry the burden of being the only person riding this ride on its last days. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I will sit on the sword. That's fine. I'm down with that. But from all the things that we've discussed here today, from the music selection to the brake runs to the roughness of the ride, as we know, Rip Ride Rockit is a hit or miss attraction. It is a gamble every single time you ride it. You don't know if you're going to get that perfect ride where the brake runs hit just right, when you pick the perfect song and the ride is not rough at all and you get the perfect experience. And then sometimes you get a ride where you have the worst song you ever heard in your life, you hit every single brake run, and it happens to be rough and maybe you banged your head, right? And then it becomes the worst ride of all time. And though this inconsistency is a reality, it does not necessarily mean that we should be gallivanting for the closure of this attraction. We've seen it time and time again when Universal has closed a ride and people have been either for the closure of the attraction or have been ambivalent towards the closure of an attraction, only for it to be replaced by something terrible. We've seen it time and time again, right? What happened when Twister closed? Nobody really cared when Twister closed, but then as soon as it gets replaced by Jimmy Fallon, everybody is crying for that ride to return. Nobody really cared when Disaster or Beetlejuice Musical Graveyard Review closed, but then when it gets replaced by Fast and Furious, everyone's crying for those rides to return, right? It happens all the time. And most certainly, I am not going to sit up here and argue for it to stay. I really don't think that it should, quite frankly. But what I will say is this: just enjoy Rip Ride Rockit while you can, because you never really know how much you love something until it's gone. After all, folks, let's just not forget that they put all the trees in a tree museum and they charge people $1.50 to see them, and don't always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone. After all, they paved paradise and put down a parking lot, for Christ's sake. Anyways, the point is, just enjoy Rip Ride Rockit while it's still here. There's no point in holding any sort of antagonistic views against it while it's still here. It's gonna go, folks. Like, you don't have to argue for it to go. It's going, okay? It's happening. So whether it's, in a year or two or it's in 5 years, whatever, it's gonna close eventually. But listen, in 10 years after it closes, you might be like, man, I kind of wish I was still around. Maybe I still wish I could have ride a ride like that. You might miss it. So, just go ahead and enjoy it while you still can. Get in your rides now. And you know what? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you're interested in seeing maybe what rides could return to replace Rip Ride Rockit, go ahead and click the video in your screen right now. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.